So let me here. Yeah. Okay. So good evening to everybody, and thanks for for the opportunity to talk about uncertainty management today. And during this talk, I will talk about these points. First, a brief description of the PRSM Research project. Also, some ideas about uncertainty. And later, I will move to the more important part, that is the model that identifies the foundations required to manage uncertainty and a diagnostic tool to assess a company's strategic business. So let's talk first about this performance, resilience, and sustainability management research project. And it happens that over years, most research in management has been related to the creation and capture of value, but there has been not much research regarding to how to protect value. You have to have in mind that Porter published his book Competitive Advantage in 1980. And during all this year, this idea of creating, capturing value has been very important. But when the world becomes more dynamic and uncertain, it's also important to protect it. And no much research has been done regarding this topic. So in this study, we invited several firms to participate. More than 250 companies did it. They belong to a variety of industries, from power generation to other ones. And the issues that we try to answer is, first, well, are there any differences between firms that are successful managing uncertainty in comparison with those that are less successful? Second, whether there are organizational and structural factors that determine the extent to which firms suffer disruptions. And this is important because if that is the case, there is plenty of space for managers to design in a different way the organizations to be more resilient and to be better positioned to deal with uncertainty. And finally, well, what can managers do about this topic? So we follow the usual research process. You have to design your tools, you have to gather data, you have to analyze. And what is important is that all these stages are based on the knowledge developed over years by the scientific community. This is important because in this study we are using more than 126 different variables. And as you see, if you randomly try to analyze combination of 2, 3, 4, 5 variables, the amount of potential combination is huge. With a model with just 4 variables, you have more than 10 million possible combinations. And without theory, without this knowledge base, finding something is like looking for a needle in a haystack. So one important additional thing is that today we are going to see the results that have to do with around 20 to 30% of the data collected. There is still a lot of work to be done running analysis. And these results has passed 2 important examination processes. The first one is by the academic community, because part of this research was presented last year at the annual conference of the Strategic Management Society in Berlin. And have in mind that last year there was a historic record of proposals, and this was one of the chosen ones. And the second examination is that the results that you are going to see were examined by publishers specialized in top management topics. This article was co-authored with Tony Davila and was the cover of the Harvard Deusto Business Review magazine. So this is the kind of information you're going to receive. And let me talk about a little about uncertainty. This concept sounds quite recent, quite new, but in practice, it has been studied for years. One of the most influential works was published in 1921 by Knight. And the most important aspect of uncertainty are two. The first is the inability to predict the direction in which various key factors will evolve, so that they may stay the same, improve, or get worse, and the inability to predict the consequences of these changes. They may be small or huge. So we have no idea about whether consequences will be positive or negative, and how large they will be. What is the current situation regarding uncertainty in firms? And now I'm going to show you a study by the American Management Association. You have information from that study, and also to the right side of the screen to our study. As you see, distributions are quite similar, and this first slide is about responses to the question of how the current piece of change the organizations experience compared with the past 5 years. And we can see that almost 80% of both samples say that they are changing faster than before, and in half of the cases, it is increasingly unpredictable. The American Management Association study is a worldwide study in which more than 1,500 respondents participated, and firms go from 100 employees to 10,000. So it's a quite large and representative study. The second screen shows you the frequency of shocks and surprise, and how have they changed during the last 5 years. And as we see, just in around 20% of the cases, they are become less. In most cases, they are the same or more. They are increasing. This next one shows you disruptions. The question is whether firms have experienced disruption over the past year, the last 12 months. And just 1/3 of respondents in both cases say that they have not experienced disruptions, but most of them say they did. And in around 30% of the cases, these disruptions were severe, major disruptions. So the issue is that some of the companies, even in our sample, went bankrupt because of these disruptions. Finally, how are organizations responding to all these changes? And as you can see, most companies have a moderate response in both levels. The ones that are effective to very effective are just 1/3. So in summary, all these slides say that the pace of change is increasing, also the frequency of shocks and the severity of their consequences, but many firms are not very good positioned to deal with them appropriately. A relevant question is, where does uncertainty come from? And when I ask this question to managers, owners, most of them answer more or less the following. They talk about the external environment. They mention things such as natural disasters, such as Hurricane Irma or Maria now, or the economic crisis, such as the one we experienced in year 2008, also to civil unrest and riots. All these factors affect organizational performance in uncertain ways. But few times people answer something related with this. Few times they mention internal factors affecting performance, and it happens that actually there are some internal sources of uncertainty, and I'm going to talk about them in a few seconds. The point is that currently the academic community knows that uncertainty is the result of both the interaction between the external environment and the internal environment. And by internal environment, I mean both business model and also the organizational system, that is the way in which managers organize their people to support the business model. One important factor in organizations is that they are full of Homo sapiens sapiens. You know already that. And let me give you some data about this species, ourselves. We have been around by 200,000 years. Most of the time we have been hunter-gatherers, and only during the last 12,000 years we have adopted agriculture. Writing, this very impressive invention, is quite new. And we have not changed much in biological terms. So does this matter really? And some people could say, well, we have gone to the moon, we have invented smartphones, and we have also invented types of food that are very cheap and are highly nutritious, or at least highly energetic. So what's the point with talking about this Homo sapiens if we have been very inventive and creative? And the point has been answered by 2 Nobel Prizes, which have talked about rationality. And the question is, well, to what extent human beings that are supposed to run organizations are rational or not? Their results say that we aim to the rational, but in practice, we are just satisfying, meaning that we are not making optimal choices. And this has to do with our cognitive and perceptual limitations. The important thing is that all of these affect the way we design and we run organizations. Let me explain a little bit more with this model. The fact that organizations are run and designed by human beings have several consequences. Here you have the evaluation execution cycle, which is a model that describes how sapient beings interact with their environment. Managers first perceive the environment, they after that interpret the information, they evaluate what they are getting. With that information, they define goals. After that, they define intention, they create action plans, and they execute those action plans in order to modify the physical world to get something out of that. But the fact that we are human beings have consequences because human nature affects this process. First, we have the evaluation gap, and also we have the implementation gap. And let me show you some of the issues that we have here. One important one is the kind of information we use, because most information is backward looking, and also the other information is noisily incomplete and lagging. So most managers are not happy with the information they have. They want more information, they want different information. Another issue has to do with interpretation. Human beings, different people will react differently to the same information. It has to do with our cognitive limitations, with our experience. In addition to that, we have biases. Biases have to do with the fact that even though if we have plenty of information, we use only the one that we prefer. So we are selective in the kind of information that we use, and also most of we think that we are over average. These cognitive limitations have consequences for organizational design and for running organizations. In the implementation gap side, also we have this idea of going from ideas to execution, and important things are assumptions. In all our model, business plans, strategic analysis, in all of them, we have expectations that we assume that are going to happen, and in some cases they do, they happen, but in other cases they don't. In addition, there is the difference between a plan and execution, and sometimes an image is worth 1,000 words. So we have theory, but practice, reality is a little bit different. So in most companies, managers are champions of strategy design, but they are quite poor at execution. And in addition to that, we have luck, Mr. Murphy, that makes more noise to this whole thing. So what are the consequences of this? First, our organization, business models, and strategies are the result of perceiving the environment, projecting its evolution, and estimating the effect of possible action plans, but we perceive the environment in a partial and distorted way due to our cognitive limitations. In addition, our knowledge of cause-effect relations is incomplete. This invariably leads to errors and problems in designing action plans. Even more, problems happen when implementing action plans. That means that all organizations and plans suffer from latent pathologies. What does it mean? That sooner or later something nasty will happen to your organization, and also means that uncertainty is not only external, but has to do with human nature. Let me clarify a little. Here you have James T. Reason Swiss cheese model of risk management, and this model says that, well, you have these latent pathologies. They may be there doing nothing for years, but one day, under the adequate conditions, they will emerge and cause catastrophic consequences. So, well, until now, I have more or less talked about concepts. Let's move to the thing that you are interested in, the results, the framework, and the diagnostic tool. So a first thing to mention is that here you have the results. This crazy screen full of tables, numbers, relationships, and I don't want to bore you with this table full of numbers. It just means that behind each assertion that I am going to make, there is quantitative evidence supporting what I'm going to say. The conclusions I am going to tell you and an executive summary of all these analysis. And we don't have the time to go into detail, but the idea is to show you what is really important in all not this stuff. So a first important thing is that both anticipation and resilience are key to uncertainty management. And they are key because anticipation and resilience not only help to create and appropriate value, but also to protect it. This framework is the main result of this study, and companies that implement it have a lower frequency of disruptive events since they are less exposed to shocks, and also the consequences they suffer are less severe. As you see, anticipation and resilience are central and are supported by two capabilities, and these two capabilities are supported by three factors. Now I go into detail to each one. The first factor, business model development. We have found that organizations that have a business model representation are more effective in dealing with uncertainty and in creating and capturing value. Business model representations are tools such as strategy maps, this invention by Norton and Kaplan. You have causal models. The idea is that you have certain nodes. These nodes are these blue balls there that are connected by causal relationships, and these nodes usually are critical success factors. The contribution of business model representations comes from the fact that they help to focus attention on what matters, a first important thing. They also help managers to communicate the goals, and not only goals, but the way in which they want those goals to be achieved. And the fact that they make explicit cause-effect relationship makes it easier to both monitor and validate those cause-effect relationships, and in consequence, learn whether they are correct or they are wrong. So here you have a usual strategy map. You can Google strategy map. You will see plenty of examples of that, and it's very important in order to advance in uncertainty management to use this kind of tool. Another important factor is organizational talent, meaning your subordinates, the people that work with you. Two key aspects are the knowledge they have or they don't, and the extent to which they are proactive. when your subordinates have knowledge and are proactive, that means that you can delegate. And not only delegate, you can trust them to do what you are telling them to do, but also with smart people that has knowledge that are proactive, you can get them involved not only in implementation, but also in evaluating whether the current strategy is correct. So in consequence, both opportunities and threats are identified earlier and quicker. That increases organizational agility to react to environmental changes, both the good and the bad ones. But when we don't have people subordinate with knowledge and proactive, that is what happened. First, top managers have no choice but getting involved in operational activities, and they have little time to guide and channel organizational energies. So having talented people is quite central. The third factor is control systems. And two important aspects of them is to include non-financial prospective information, the same idea as the balance scorecard, and also the interactive use, meaning that bosses use this information in face-to-face meeting in which they try to stimulate dialogue, debate, and learning. Where does the contribution comes from? Because with this kind of management control system, you have early identification and management of strategic uncertainty. These big issues that don't let top managers to sleep. In consequence, organizations are better positioned with this kind of control system to deal with the many uncertainties that surround them. Let's talk about the two capabilities that these factors support. The first one is focusing managerial attention, meaning the things that top managers pay attention to. First, it's important to take into account the main role of top managers, and it is defining the strategic direction of the organization and adapting that direction when necessary, and also mobilize and align employees to fulfill the organizational goals and mission. So what is the most scarce and valuable resource managers have is their time, and what they pay attention to is not important for them, but for the whole company. What happens when they fail to focus their attention appropriately? Well, they no longer guide and facilitate their subordinate efforts. We have found that anticipation capabilities suffer, the same with organizational learning, and also subordinates make more mistakes. Those are quantitative results coming from this study. So the idea behind all of this, and it's very related with the literature, is that less is more. Focus means selecting certain things and not paying attention to others. And as you do that, you can give a larger, bigger yes to the important things. But in order to do that, you have to say many no's to less important things. Let's go to the second capability, the learning and integration one. And it has to do with learning. And one important raw material of learning is information. But the fact that we have information asymmetries in organization, there is information that top management doesn't see. Even in some cases, if they have access to that information, they may not be able to interpret it. They don't have the adequate knowledge. That is important because if managers are not aware of important information, it means that they will not change strategic direction when necessary. So what is required to do here, managers face attention, and on the one hand, they have to motivate and align employees to implement the current strategy, but also they have to learn whether that strategy has incorrect assumptions or things that are not working properly. And in order to do that in a better way, they require the support of subordinates. How to deal with this tension, and this is a major finding of this study. First, creating spaces for debate, questioning, and learning, asking questions such as what should have happened but did not, what shouldn't have happened but did, and also creating spaces for integrating and articulating knowledge. In many companies, knowledge is not very well connected. We have these areas that only are focused on their topics. There's not much conversation, and you can gain a lot of knowledge, take advantage of the knowledge you already have when the one you have is articulated. In order to do that, you need the spaces I mentioned before, but notice that although top management is the one that creates these spaces, they work only when subordinates are willing to take the risk of telling what they really think, to share what they interpret, to share their doubts, and that means trust. So that is key. So finally, we have these frameworks I have described to you, and well, you may wonder, well, it sounds a little bit obvious. You're just putting together some ideas that I have listened about before. Why this is new? And let's have a look at what is the reality of organizations. So first, regarding this idea of using business model representations, few firms show progress here. It is around 30% in the United States and Europe, and also the same in South America. This business model, you have to first identify critical success factors and establish causality relationships among them. And as you see, the level of excellence in doing that is quite low. In most cases, managers are not satisfied with their business models representations. So we have problems here. Organizational talent in short supply. When we are talking about knowledge, the knowledge our subordinates have, in most cases, it is below excellence. It is mediocre. The same with productivity. And that means that just 1 in 4 managers is willing to delegate. So because we lack talent, we have issues. And finally, other factor, the third one, is management control system. Most of them using financial information, and in spite that the balanced scorecard has been there for many years, telling the importance of non-financial information, financial information is 2 times more used than financial one. Also, the diagnostic use versus the interactive use. The idea of the interactive use of information is that you use that in order to have discussions, to have debate, to have a learning process, and also just 1 firm in 4 use their control systems in that way. Also problems here. Let's have a look at the capabilities, managerial attention. 82% of managers say that very often they have to put their attention away from what really is important due to firefighting. So instead of top managers, we have firefighters. Regarding learning and integration, you have a paradox, because most firms are satisfied with the knowledge they already have, but when it comes to learning, only 1/3 of them are satisfied. So the fact that most firms do poorly in the component of this uncertainty management framework means that there is a huge opportunity to firms that want to do something about this. Because what is important to have in mind is that one doesn't need to be perfect. One just needs to be a little bit better than competitors. So now let me move to the strategic fitness diagnostic tool. In order to get all this information, we created this tool, and the tools provide an scanning of the company. Here, it tell us the extent to which a company is really ready to deal with disruptions, its level of anticipation and resilience, and the level of each of the components of the framework I have just described. In this table, you can see that each variable is in a scale from 0 to 100, And it also shows the percentile in which the company is found relative to others. And also you can see the distribution to the right. So we are here having two firms whose real names have been replaced to preserve confidentiality. First, we have Entertaining Corporation. This is a firm that offers families a highly innovative, fun, educational, and interactive experience. This company is in a minimally aggressive environment, as you can see here, only in the 23 percentile. His talent is excellent. Also, it is above average in terms of resources and capabilities, here below, and has a very attractive value proposition. However, its level of structural exposure to disruption is high, very high. And also, it has a minimal anticipation capability and resilience to disruptions. Also, they have almost no capacity to capture value. They create a lot of value, but they are not able to capture that. So in this case, the main problem is not about uncertainty, but it's a problem that the business model is not allowing them to capture enough value of all the value that they create. They may try to improve certain things, but the main problem that this diagnosis tool tells us is that their business model has problems, and in practice, 1 year after they participated in this study, they went bankrupt because of this. You have the other company, Surf Company, that is a competitive industrial service company. Both its organizational talent and its resources and capabilities are in the low range, here and here. Also, the level of exposure to structural disruptions is high, not as high as the other company, but still high. And it has above average anticipatory and reaction capabilities. Here you have reaction, anticipation, and reaction. Although a low level of resilience, they have problems here. In addition, they don't use very well managerial attention. What this company has to do in order to improve the uncertainty management capabilities is to improve organizational talent and use in a better way managerial attention. In this company, managers are firefighters and not really top managers, and also improve the way in which they design their management control systems. So you have here a description of the diagnostic tool. It provides this screening of the whole company and tell us what is the source of the problem and what can managers do about that. So, well, this is an important question. Is this idea of improving an organization capability to manage uncertainty a competitive advantage? And here you have my opinion. It's just my opinion. And my opinion is that in the short time, it is. Over time, you can't really think that a competitive advantage could come from any tool or practice that can be copied or imitated. But the question is whether you want to be one of the first that implement this kind of tools, or you just want to react. Conclusions. Well, a series of shortcomings limit organizations' ability to manage uncertainty. We have seen that we are using backward-looking management control systems, that we have reactive and mediocre subordinates, that we have hypothetical business models, that knowledge is disconnected and underused. We have a lot of knowledge in our organizations, and top managers, we are not very good at using that. Also, top managers are not focused much because they are firefighting most of the time. So you may wonder, well, this is the result of the study, and they are quite representative. And you may wonder, why these problems seem to be so common. And here again, you have my opinion. And in my opinion, I see that addressing these shortcomings require asking very difficult and tough questions, uncomfortable questions. So, for instance, what to do about these mediocre subordinates? Should we question our strategy? In many places, strategy is like the law. You can't discuss anything about that. You can't have doubt about that. And as the environment changes and as your organizational design is not in a good match with the environment, you have to do something about that. Also, who should question our strategy? Audit or management? Are there people that can help in this process? So in many cases, instead of asking these tough questions, trying to answer them, we just get involved in problem avoidance. In addition, this uncertainty management idea requires organizations to value people that recognize they don't know. And for years, since we were children, we have been valued because we know things. But in some cases, it's very important to recognize that, to look for help, to invite subordinates, colleagues to discuss about important things in order to have a better understanding of what is happening. Finally, during good times, there are few incentives to managers to address these tough questions, tough issues. So companies that are willing to address these issues may use this framework to help them improve their uncertainty management capabilities in order to be in a better position to take advantage of new opportunities and also to deal with major uncertainties. That is all from my side. Questions and comments are very welcome.
Folks, we are now open for question and answer. So if you have any questions, you could either insert it in the question box, or you could equally raise your hand if you want to speak directly with the speaker. Now let me go straight to the question box. There's one from Brother Mehdi Shahnawaz Jalil. The question is, what are some of the models that can be used to predict uncertainty, to overcome organizational uncertainty? Okay, this is a supplementary question. To overcome organizational uncertainty, how an individual can manage both self and the place of work?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Okay, the first one is, what are some of the models that can be used to predict uncertainty? Let's go with this first.
Yeah. So, well, the financial people have been for many years trying to do that. And when you have enough information, somehow you can do something about that. But I will say that predicting is not very easy. The 2008 crisis we had shows that all the money we put, all the investment we did regarding predicting didn't work very well, really. But what we can do is to use our organizational talent to be aware of early warning signals. And because we have these top-down organizational structures, we don't take much advantage of that. So more than predicting, I would say that we human beings are very good at identifying early signals and to react to that. Perhaps if you invest a lot of money, you could, in some fields, be capable to predict. But I would say that for many years we have put a lot of money in that, and we don't see many results.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a supplementary question from Brother Jalil. The question is, to overcome organizational uncertainty, How an individual can manage both self and the place of work.
Okay, so, well, one first thing to have in mind is the extent to which you are a powerful person in the organization. Because if you are in an organization that you are the subordinate of the subordinate, you have nothing to do about that. But if you are in a top position, I will say that it's very important to recognize the limits of our own knowledge, and not only at the personal level, but also at the area level, at the business unit level, at the organizational level. Because in most cases, we are so confident on our knowledge that we ignore what we don't know. We are not even aware of that. So the first step is recognizing that and having open discussions in which you share these ideas with colleagues, with subordinates, with the ones you trust. And by the time you are able to recognize large areas in which you have not much knowledge, you are in a better position to deal with uncertainty because you know that you don't know. That is the first step to start learning something about that and be better positioned than competitors to address the uncertainty that is coming from that. So it's a process at the personal level, that with yourself. I would say that humble managers are in a better position to deal with uncertainty because they can recognize that they don't know, and creating the kind of atmosphere in which recognizing that I don't know everything is something valid. So that would be my answer to the question.
Thank you very much. There's another one. Last question we have. To what extent this framework depends on the type of national culture?
Okay, so as you see in the framework, it depends a lot of having these open conversations with subordinates, this creation of spaces for learning, creating spaces for integrating knowledge. And in some cultures, the ones that are more vertical, I would say, this is not always easy, but I would say that more important than national culture is organizational culture. So really, in spite of the culture of your country, you can create spaces in which people can talk openly about what they need to learn. You can also recognize that, for instance, your strategy has weak points, and all of that helps to improve not only our own diagnostic of how well positioned are we to deal with all this uncertainty world, but also to start the first steps in the process of strengthening, of dealing with the main factors that can help us to improve our capability to deal with uncertainty. So I would say, to summarize, yes, in more open or less vertical societies, probably doing this is easier, but at the end it depends on the boss. The kind of boss we have sets the context, and I have been seeing very open mind, very good bosses in all kind of countries. So somehow it limits, but you can do something about that.
Okay, that really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Professor, any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
Yeah, I just wanted to say again what I said when I was talking about the framework. And sometimes managers think that they have to be really perfect in all the dimensions of a model in order to succeed. And given that we are in a competitive society, in a competitive world, well, and we have all these biases and limitations as human beings, well, it's almost impossible to be perfect. But it doesn't really matter to be perfect, because what matters is being a little bit better than your competitors. And that means starting with these important questions before they start to think about that. Thinking about, well, we have been doing very well for years, but there is a risk of trusting the past success. What are our weak points or weak aspects today? What are our regions of ignorance? What can we do about that? Do we have the correct subordinate? We have the talent we need in order to implement this strategy, to change this strategy? So at the end, probably the ones who get the most of a framework like the one I presented are the people willing to learn, organizations that instead of thinking of their past success, have the willingness to learn, to improve, and are humble enough in order to start this path of learning.
Thank you very much. And I really want to thank you, Professor, on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for taking the time to deliver this webinar on our platform. So once again, thank you very much. And thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. We are recording it, so please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org to learn about our upcoming programs or to access the recorded versions. With that note, I would like to end and conclude. So you all have a good day and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you.